Early 2015, the last remaining breath of the 360 days. Christian, Josh, Taher have already moved on to the Xbox One. AEW is already out. Season 2, Call of Duty Ghosts, the final days of the 360. Getting players was quite the difficult task for Will this tournament. He had to scramble to get some players that played a little bit with the friend group, but they were borderline randoms other than that. Thankfully, there were some new players that were joining the tourney that were part of the friend group, and Will knew IRL. Those players were Cesar, Matt Zitak, Mike, and Fation. He also got a player named Watchshroud that started to actively play with the Trolling Bros. New rules were in place. Radar Always On and Panic Knives were officially banned. This time, Will got 16 confirmed players before the tournament started, and a lot of new faces and some old faces making a return. Will was the clear favorite to win Season 2 and was seen as the new best sniper for time to come. Players that were in contention were mainly Eric, Matt Zitak, and Trayvon, and some players like Fation and Cesar were seen as good, but Fation was never really seen played by most of the group, so knowledge on him was very limited. Players like Sammy and Mark have improved greatly, but were not seen as top players, and Strat was definitely a wild card, as he was known for being a hardcore camper, but not that great skill-wise. Round 1 was underway, and the first match was a heavily anticipated match between Mark and Cesar. A very good matchup between two good snipers. Unfortunately, one would be going home early. And who would that be? What a game that was. Cesar dropping out to a huge lead early. Mark then took that away and took a lead of his own, going up 16-12, but then Cesar took it right back and had a great late game to close it out to go to round 2. This game reminded me honestly a lot of Christian versus Eric in Season 1, just for the same reason of Christian last season went up really early, I think up 6-1 or something like that, and Cesar pretty much did the same thing. Then Mark took a little lead late in the game, and then Cesar making the comeback. What an amazing game, and sadly Mark is going home round 1 yet again, 2 tournaments in a row. Still a good sniper, just played some tough opponents, and that's really the struggles of these early tournaments being single elimination. A lot of great snipers just didn't get to shine. Staying in this conference, we had the reigning champion Will playing against the new sniper in tournaments, Fation. Fation was seen as a good sniper, but the only one that actually seen him play was Cesar, and that's how he got introduced into this tournament, was through Cesar. Will was the heavy favorite going into this game and was seen as unstoppable. Fation and Will actually exchanged trash talk in school before their matchup. Will, a very cocky player, didn't take it very seriously, but maybe he should have. Fation pulling one of the biggest upsets of all time, sending the reigning champion home in round 1, showing that immediately he is a top player and should be feared for time to come. Will was playing very well, maintaining a decent lead most of the time, but Fation keeping it in striking distance and going on a 4-kill streak while Will was up 19-16 to end Will's Call of Duty Ghosts undefeated streak. Moving on to the NTC, now everyone is super motivated now that Will is knocked out of the tournament for good, opens up so many doors for this tournament. The next match we have is Sammy versus Freed. Sammy, a good player who didn't really get a chance to prove himself last season, losing early to Taher in round 1, was going up against Freed, another sniper who lost in round 1, and once again a decent sniper who's known for going for a lot of no-scopes. Who would prove themselves this season after both losing round 1 last season? Sammy dominating this match 20-10. Freed seemed to have gone for many no-scopes and it didn't really work out this time around. Funny how both round 1 20-10 games from this season and last season, both footage got lost and I think both got corrupted. I don't remember exactly what happened to them, but they are both lost. Thankfully neither of them were very not good matches, so there you go. Staying in this conference, we had Eric versus Striker, probably one of the most lopsided matches of all time. Eric, being a very good player who lost early in round 1 last season to Christian in a nail-biter, is trying to make a run this season and prove that he is a very good sniper, and that he did in this round 1 match, absolutely destroying Striker and not looking back, tying the all-time record at the time of a single game performance set by Will in his win versus Dark Gabby in the Season 1 semifinals. Staying in this conference yet again, we have another terribly lopsided matchup with Matt Ztak, a very good player who's making his debut versus Frosty Steel, one of the lowest ranked players. Should be a blowout, right? Yes, it was. A blowout was exactly what it was. In due respect to Frosty, he did keep the game manageable at the start, but Matt took it away completely towards the end and pushing him to play Sammy in round 2 for a highly anticipated match. Switching to the ATC, we had Watch Trout versus Trayvon, another seemingly lopsided match, with Trayvon being a good favorite to win this game, and not only this game, but a good favorite to win this tournament, and he would be versing Watch Trout, who was just a really campy player. He would camp a lot, but he wasn't really the best. He had his moments where he looked good at times, but would this match come true like our other lopsided games? Not at all. In fact, it seemed lopsided the other way around. Trout not only won this game, but completely dominated on one of the best players in this tournament. It turns out Trout's camping ways were too much for Trayvon, and he got completely outplayed this game. Trout would move on to play Cesar in round 2, and that would be a huge test for him. Staying on this side of the conference for our last round 1 game of the ATC, we had Mike versus Sable, two snipers who weren't that great but somewhat decent. The winner of this match would surely get routed by Fation in round 2. Mike would go on to win this match pretty convincingly, moving him on to round 2 to play Fation. And as for our last match of the NTC, Arctic would forfeit versus Carlos. I guess it should be expected when trying to get pretty much random people to participate in this tournament. Round 2 was underway, and so far, Will and Trayvon, the champion and one of the better players in the tournament, got eliminated round 1, which opens up a ton of doors for people to win. Fation looking the most impressive, beating the unstoppable COD Ghost Will, and Eric, Matt, and Sammy all looking really good as well, getting dominant wins. Cesar also getting a very clutch win versus a good player was very good for him, and Trout turning the tables on Trayvon also being very impressive. Fation would now be the clear favorite to win this tournament, with Eric and Matt Ztak following closely behind. Big news. For the first and only time in tournament history, a rule would change mid-tourney. Unanimously, 90% of the players remaining in this tournament voted for the Radar Always On rule to be changed back to Radar Always Off. So with that being said, the rule was changed, and this may have hurt Cesar the most. Our first round 2 matchup was Trout vs Cesar. Not really anything expected of this matchup. Most people thought Cesar would win easily, but Trout getting a dominant win versus Trayvon would prove that he wasn't just going to get pushed over, and he would probably put up a fight, and put up a fight he did. Trout completely dominated Cesar from start to finish. Cesar would have maybe liked to have preferred Radar Always On over the Camp King Trout. Trout camping like crazy in the first half, but then he said the hell with it, and he had such a big lead, he just rushed Cesar and was still dominating the match, moving him on to the semifinals in a huge upset win, and proves to be a disappointing loss for Cesar. And by the way, you know how I said earlier how the winner of Mike vs. Sable would probably lose to Fation in round 2? Well, that pretty much happened as Mike forfeit against Fation because he didn't even want to attempt to play him, moving on Fation to play Trout in the semifinals. Moving on to the NTC, we would have yet another lopsided match. This one would be Eric versus Carlos. Carlos won off a forfeit, and Eric dominated his way to this matchup, and would yet again dominate, winning 20-8 and completely getting revenge from losing so early last season, and looked like a force to be reckoned with as he would move on to his first ever semifinals appearance. Staying in this conference, for our last round 2 game, it is definitely the most anticipated of the round 2 matches, being Sammy versus Matt Zetak, two contenders who were looking to move on to the semifinals. The game started as you would expect, a close game going back and forth, and the score was eventually 8-6 in favor of Matt, and then Matt did the unthinkable. Matt completely dominated after 8-6, not even letting Sammy get a single kill after that, and making him rage quit for the first ever rage quit in sniping tournament history, even dancing a little at the end to celebrate him moving on to play Eric in the semifinals. As we move on to the semifinals, the NTC went pretty much as expected. As for the ATC, it was a complete clutterfunk, and went almost the polar opposite of what most people were predicting, making for a fun semifinals. Most people figured the semifinals would be Will versus Trayvon or Will versus Cesar, but nope, completely different. Fation versus Trout. Fation versus Watch Trout. Fation at this point of the tournament is the favorite to win the tournament, beating Will in round 1. But, was it a fluke, or was Fation really a good player? Trout, on the other side, was a huge underdog in both of his victories, but proves that strategy can still beat skill sometimes. But, can his camping tactics come through versus Fation? Fation, at the end of the day, was just too good for Trout's camping tactics. Trout had a great start to the game, going up 7-3, but once Fation adjusted to his playstyle, it was night-night for Trout, and his reign of camping Kara was over, as Fation would move on to his first ever finals appearance. On the other side of the semifinals, we had Eric versus Matt Zetak, the most highly anticipated match of the tournament so far. Both players looking unstoppable, demolishing their opponents easily, but who would be the one to go down in this match? Eric proving that he is the better player, with a convincing win to move him on to the finals to play Fation. This game started off close as we all expected, but towards the end, just like many matches before, Eric took the game over towards the end and stopped a late game comeback effort from Matt Zetak to win the game 20-15. The championship, the finals, for all the marbles, Fation versus Eric would surely be a great match. Both very good players. Fation beating Will, winning off a forfeit in round 2, and then beating Trout, the Camp King, to make it here to the finals in really good fashion. And Eric on the other side, dominating pretty much everyone in his path, even Matt Zetak, a great player. This should be a good match. Eric, especially after last season losing round 1, should be hungry for revenge, and this should be good. Well, let me tell you a story. So Will, trying to get Fation and Eric to play, he thought this would be a simple task, but day after day, week after week, Fation would be on usually in the evenings, nights, and so would Eric, right? Not for a few weeks. In fact, Eric wasn't getting on often at all, but one fateful day, the two were on the same day and were ready to play. The match started, and it started perfectly. Close match, both players trading shots. Fation found himself up 8-5. He would see Eric, they would both miss a shot. Then Eric would land the next shot on Fation, but then Eric went AFK and eventually would leave the game and would never be seen again. After about a week, the match was counted as a forfeit, and Fation would get his first ever championship and would win the second ever sniping tournament. A very weird tournament. In my honest opinion, I think Fation would have won this match anyways, as he is, as we know now, one of the best snipers of all time and a great late game player, but it is still a bummer to see a potentially great match get taken away from us. And now, it's my final thoughts and rankings for the Season 2 sniping tournament. The best match of the tournament goes to me versus Fation in round 1. By the way, I just want to say I hate talking about myself in third person. I can't wait to go to the tourneys that I'm not in. I don't like doing it. But anyways, this match between me and Fation was considered the best match to ever be played up until me and Christian's Season 13 finals matchup. It sucks that I lost this matchup, but I gotta take the L. And Fation, a great sniper, as we know now, one of the best snipers of all time. Third in my books of all time. But this match, I mean, what can be said about it? It's 20-19, it was a nail-biter, two all-time great snipers going at it, the best rivalry back then in the single elimination tournaments, and was just an amazing match to watch. Really, that's all I have to say about it. The best underdog story of the tournament goes to Fation. I mean, this one was pretty obvious. There was really only 2 contestants for this one, and it was between Shrout and Fation. I would say Fation is the biggest underdog story of the tournament. Him beating me in COD Ghost and winning the whole thing is definitely better than someone who lost in the semifinals. Not saying Shrout didn't have a good underdog story, he definitely did, but Fation's was just clearly better. This was an obvious one, and there was a few underdog stories that were definitely, you know, could be told, but I would say this is the best one. The most loved sniper of the tournament goes to Fation. Another clear option, another clear choice. Fation beating me, the favorite to win the tournament, immediately makes him the most loved player in the tournament, and his comeback story and his effort overall will just make him the most loved sniper in the tournament. I guess there's a few players I probably could have picked. Frosty Steel is always loved in these tournaments. Mazzy Tack was pretty loved in this tournament, but I would say Fation for pretty much his underdog story, so it kind of ties into the last one. That's pretty much all I have to say about that one. The most hated sniper of the tournament goes to Watch Shrout. This is another clear-cut choice, and this one is really obvious. Shrout was by far the most hated sniper in this tournament, and for obvious reasons. It was because he was a very, very crazy camper, very infamous camper, and people just generally don't like people that camp really hard in tournaments. I didn't really personally mind. I do enjoy when people do strategy to win against better players, but at the end of the day, people just didn't really like Shrout because he camped a lot, and it's understandable. The biggest disappointment of the tournament goes to myself. Another obvious choice. Obviously, as winning the tournament before, I was expected to win this tournament, and I lost in round 1. So, last season it was Josh who was the biggest disappointment, and he lost in the semifinals. At least he made it to the semifinals. I lost in round 1, so not even coming close to the projections that I was before this tournament. So, this is another clear-cut answer. I definitely was the biggest disappointment of this tournament. On a competitive scale, I would rank this tournament a 4 out of 10. Now, if we're going off pure statistics, statistically speaking, and God, I sound like a nerd. I am a nerd. But anyways, statistically speaking, this is actually the least competitive tournament of all time in terms of win percentage combined. This is actually the least competitive tournament of all time, but I think it actually does beat one other tournament that we'll talk about in the future. But 4 out of 10 for this competitive scale. A vast majority of players in this tournament were not very good and were fillers and randoms. But I think this tournament, the top of this tournament was very, very good, which is why this carries it to the score it's at, which is 4 out of 10. If the top wasn't as good as it is, it'd be like a 2 or 1. But me and Fation are in the top 3 of all time in terms of all-time snipers. Then you have people like Eric, who's also a very good all-time sniper, and Mazzy Tack, who only played 1 season, this being his only season, but he definitely would have been an all-time great sniper if he had played more. Really, other than that, we have another great sniper, which is Sammy. Even though he didn't do very well in this tournament, his reign of terror didn't start. Well, we'll talk about that when it starts. But, Sammy, another all-time great sniper in this tournament. And Trayvon, very disappointing this tournament as well, but he is another definitely good sniper of all time. But other than that, really, most people are one and dones in this tournament, meaning that this is their only tournament they played in, and they either lost off a forfeit or to Eric, like Carlos lost to Eric in the second round. So, I mean, this tournament is very top heavy, but half of this tournament is very, very bad, so definitely a 4 out of 10 on the competitive scale. On a fun scale, I would rate this tournament, again, a 4 out of 10. Season 1 was a very funny and fun tournament for its ease to set up. This tournament, however, was very, very difficult to set up. Definitely one of the harder tournaments to set up, like I said, because we basically had randoms for a lot of the spots in this tournament, and people that weren't IRLs. In fact, I think only a few people here I knew in real life in this tournament. And, of course, the finals. We didn't have a finals for this tournament, so that definitely takes it down a notch. As for the matches, this is a funny tournament because the first 2 matches of this tournament were really, really good matches, and then after that, there really wasn't a good match of this tournament whatsoever. So, in terms of fun scale, definitely a 4 out of 10. Pretty lopsided matches for the most part. A lot of blowouts. Like I said, only me versus Fation and Mark versus Cesar were the good matches of this tournament. And that's why it's a 4 out of 10 on the fun scale. The overall scale of this tournament, the overall rankings from this tournament is a 3.5 out of 10, which has this as the 10th best tournament of all time. There's many reasons that this is a very low ranked tournament. The main ones is, like I said, the lack of competition definitely adds to that. The main reason is definitely, I mean, obviously no finals match. I mean, there was a finals match, but it didn't have an ending to it, so that alone is definitely a big black stain for this tournament. Lack of competition. The only thing that carries this tournament was that me versus Fation round 1 matchup. As you can tell by all these awards, it's all Fation and just our game basically in round 1. Trap's run was kind of fun as well. That's maybe about it. His underdog story was definitely pretty interesting. But overall scale, matches weren't very close. Competition level wasn't very high. Every match, like I said, blowout after the first 2 games. So, I mean, yeah, that's really the overall scale. The only thing that makes it a 3.5, like I said, me versus Fation, and people were into this tournament. There's 2 tournaments that are ranked lower than this that have good reason to be ranked lower than this, and definitely it's because the people weren't really into those tournaments and enjoying them. At least this one had some kind of enjoyment to it, so that's why it's ranked at 3.5 out of 10, and the 10th best tournament. And finally, the best moment of the tournament, it's kind of my personal favorite, but I have to look at this objectively. Once again, it's Fation beating me in round 1. This is really the only answer for this tournament. This is clearly and obviously the best moment of this tournament. Such a crazy underdog story. Even to this day, one of the biggest upsets of all time. Now, obviously, as we know, Fation is one of the best snipers of all time, but before this, he wasn't known. He wasn't in the last tournament, and we didn't know how good he was, and beating me, like I said, the clear favorite to win this tournament, was a crazy underdog story, and probably one of the best matches of all time, still to this day. So that is very obviously the best moment from this tournament. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and the next retrospective is Season 3, which is a good one, so I'll see you guys for that one.